Today's episode is sponsored by my friends at the National Ranching Heritage Center in Lubbock, Texas. The National Ranching Heritage Center on the campus of Texas Tech University tells the story of ranching in the American West through over 50 historic structures. One of these structures is the Pitchfork Ranch Cookhouse. The Pitchfork Ranch is a historic Texas ranch located 80 miles east of Lubbock that you will hear more about from my guest on today's episode. The one place where everyone could come together on the vast ranch was the cookhouse. The simple wood-frame structure was a sanctuary for family reunions, birthday parties, and of course daily meals for the ranch hands and cowboys since its construction around 1900. It began as a one-room structure and was expanded over the years. The cookhouse consists of a kitchen and dining area and was in continuous use by Pitchfork Ranch cowboys for 2 meals a day until its move to the National Ranching Heritage Center in 2007. At mealtime, the cowboys waited outside on benches or under a tree until the cook rang the dinner bell. Though the exterior walls were covered in modern shingles in the 1950s, the original wood clapboard siding was still intact and is exposed again. The dining hall is a long, spare space furnished with well-used wood tables and wood benches handmade by Pitchfork cowboys. You can see the Pitchfork Ranch Cookhouse in person at the National Ranching Heritage Center in Lubbock, Texas. You can check them out online at ranchingheritage.org. Come experience real ranches, real stories, real heritage at the National Ranching Heritage Center in Lubbock, Texas. I'd like to start today's show with a poem by S. Omer Barker. This is from Barker's 1954 book, Songs of the Saddlemen, and it's entitled The Wagon. They asked me, "What's this wagon that we hear so much about? Ain't wagons simply wagons?" Well, it kind of laid me out to realize such ignorance was still a running rife about cow-country customs and the facts of cowboy life. And so I found a sunny place and squatted on my heels to try and make them savvy that a double pair of wheels ain't all that makes a wagon in the meaning of the word, the way us fellers use it that have been out with a herd. For a wagon ain't the wagon on the roundup or the trail unless it totes a chuck box in the region of its tail. This chuck box is the cupboard where the Coosie keeps the gear with which he wrangles rations for the cowpoke cavalier, who come in off the cow work like a farmer seeks his shack to save his hungry stomach from a-growing to his back. He may get whistleberries and shotgun wadding bread. It may be beef and biscuits, but it gets the waddy fed. Yet, chuck ain't all the wagon means to sons of saddle sweat. It means dry clothes, a bed, a fire, and somewhere he can set to do what little talking that the cowboy's life allows about the thoughts he's thinking when he's out there with the cows. It's where his comrades bring him when he's sick or hurt or shot. It's his anchor. It's his haven. It's the only home he's got. So when he throws his bedroll in the wagon for a work, it means he swore allegiance to a job he'll never shirk. You've heard of soldiers loyal to the flags of regiments. The cowhand's flag's the wagon and the brand it represents. They asked me, "What's the wagon?" It's a thing words can't explain unless you've bedded by one under stars out on the plain. 2 lonesome riders passing pause to hail like passing ships, and which-a-way's the wagon is the question on their lips. So when a cowboy's time has come, St. Peter hears his hail. It's which-a-way's the wagon, and he points him up the trail. Howdy folks, this is Andy Hedges, and you're listening to Cowboy Crossroads. On each episode, I interview a different guest and ask them to share stories and discuss music, poetry, and culture from the working cowboy West and beyond. My guest today is Bob Moorhouse. Bob Moorhouse is a cowboy, horseman, and photographer. Bob worked at the Pitchfork Ranch in Guthrie, Texas for 35 years, and for the last 20 years of his time there, he was the ranch manager. Bob has been inducted into the Texas Cowboy Hall of Fame, the National Cowboy and Western Heritage Museum's Hall of Great Westerners, and in 2008, he was a recipient of the Golden Spur Award from the National Ranching Heritage Center in Lubbock, Texas. Bob is well known for his photography of working cowboys on the Pitchfork Ranch, and in 2000, he published a book of his photos entitled Pitchfork Country. I sat down with Bob at his home in Weatherford, Texas, and recorded this interview. Here's Bob Moorhouse.
Well, I'm not good at history. My dad came from Kaufman, which is East Texas. And I don't know why they came from Kaufman to the Benjamin area. And my brother says, that's just where the wagon wheel fell off. He said, I wish it fell off a little further back or up, or, where there was better country or oil or something, but he was kind of joking about that. But my dad had several brothers, a couple of sisters, and they were all in the ranching industry, and they partnered. Some of them did. They were poor. They really were. They really had to work for what they had. And my dad was the most successful of all of them. And my mother and dad, they skimped. And my dad just worked for wages, cowboy wages. And I tell my brothers, we talk about it some. Don't know how my dad put together some land, a small ranch, like he did, raised 4 boys, went to college, and then we've added to it, to the ranch, and it's amazing what my mother and dad did without to have what they passed on to us. The generation, I hate to get started on this, but the generations have changed so much from my dad to even to my generation to the next generation. And I can't say my daughters are, but they're good. They know how to work. Any kid that's raised on the ranch knows how to work compared to other people. And then they know right from wrong compared to other people. I guess because we had to work. We couldn't come home from school and get on the computer or play games. We came home, put on work clothes, and went to work. After school, of course, all summer. And that's just the way it was. There wasn't a whole lot of recreation in our family. There really wasn't. We had a big tank. Most people call it a pond or a lake by our house. And I guess the most recreation we had was swimming every day in the summer. And it was just a ritual. And maybe because we didn't want to take a bath, maybe, I don't know. But we didn't miss anything. If you don't have it, you don't miss it. So we worked and enjoyed it and had fun as a family, and all got along. Today, kids don't know how to work. They don't want to work. Not only the kids, the grown-ups don't know how to work, except the people in the ranching and farming industry. Well, of course, other industries, I guess, but if you're a farmer or rancher, you have to work, unless you have a lot of oil or something. But anyway, that's kind of where, and then all 4 of us boys went to Sul Ross, Alpine, and then transferred to Texas Tech. And I think Tom transferred to Tech a couple of times, but ended up going back to Sul Ross. Tom didn't fit in at Tech, big hat and tall boots. Just it wasn't kosher at that time, but he fit in good at Sul Ross. My earliest memories are riding either behind my dad or in front of him. And then later riding bareback as we worked very early in my life. I didn't think I had a choice of doing anything in my life but being a rancher, coming home, going. I felt like I had to go to Southern Ross for some reason. I don't know why I thought I had to, but thought I had to go to Southern Ross, graduate, and come home and be a rancher. Of course, you can only cut a pie so many ways, like 4 boys, and there wasn't enough room for all of us at home on the ranch. And we had a neighbor that helped us, and I remember riding with him, as I said, behind him or in front of him. And later, we rode bareback a lot. I don't know if Daddy couldn't afford saddles for everybody or what, but I think that's a good lesson in riding. If you can learn to ride bareback, you can dang sure ride a horse with a saddle. And we played little polo later when I was at Pitchfork. Played against Texas Tech and different ones. And I bought a flat saddle. I call it a flat saddle. I guess it's polo saddle or English saddle. And I'll have to say I never fell off that saddle. And I think it's all because I rode so much bareback when I was young. That's kind of my early, I don't remember a lot in my early times, but I don't remember much about my dad except work. He didn't have any hobbies, just work. Yeah, he taught us a lot about cattle. I still have the same sayings working cattle as he did. And it was no one. He worked for the Masto or McFadden Ranch, and the guy that ran it was more like my dad's dad than my dad's real dad. My dad's real dad, my grandfather died when he was young, and my dad was very young. So that guy was kind of Dad's mentor. And Dad didn't have any fancy ways of doing things. It's just whatever worked. It's the way you did it. You know, it's not like you've got to do it this way, you've got to do it that way. And just whatever it took to get the cows in the pen is the way you did it. And you learn a lot about the cowboy by doing that. And some of the young cowboys today think you got to do this. You can't ride in front of a person. You can't do this and that. But I'm kind of like my dad. If you need to ride in front of a person, I guess you ride in front. Whenever I was manager at Pitchfork, I went with the Cowboys a whole lot more than what a manager should. And those young guys, you know, I might do something that they didn't think was kosher, but because sometimes some of these young boys have too many rules that don't make sense, but you got to go to by those rules because I don't know whoever taught them, but they weren't raised up like I was, because whatever it took, it's what it took. That's what we did to get. I used that to get them in the pen as an example. But I don't remember a lot of things about. Well, I do, but I don't know how to explain them more than what I have explained. But it was fun growing up. We worked hard. We really did. And I'm glad we did. I wish more people worked hard. I wish more people had common sense. I pretty well went from school at Lubbock, Texas Tech, to the Pitchforks. And I was very fortunate to get to do that. I really don't know. Well, I do know. It's kind of a long story, but very fortunate to get to go to the Pitchforks. They kind of hired me as, everybody thought I was assistant manager, or some people call me bookkeeper, but I sure wasn't a bookkeeper because I wasn't smart enough to keep books. I kept some books, but most of our books were kept in St. Louis, and much more so today because of the computers. We did do longhand and keep a lot of books, unlike they do today. There's no letters written. It's kind of sad. There's no letters written back and forth like there were, and it's just all on computers. But anyway, I ended up at the Pitchforks, and I guess they probably didn't want to call me assistant manager until they kind of saw what I was, and I kind of became assistant manager. And of course, Jim Humphreys, a great guy, great manager, and he still had a lot of go in him. And I learned a lot from him. I learned a lot from Jim, more about traveling than I did the ranching, because I already kind of knew from my dad about the ranching part of it, but I didn't know how to travel. Say going to St. Louis, go anywhere, because we didn't do that when I was young. My folks didn't. We might take a small vacation in the summer, but we certainly didn't get on an airplane. It was everybody jumped in a station wagon and went. But Jim taught me a lot, and Jim knew everybody. He'd go to the conventions, and he would introduce me to everybody, and it was fun, and just learned a lot like that through Jim. And he was a great guy. Everybody loves Jim. But as I say, I learned the ranching part of it from my dad, and then, of course, then learned from a smaller ranch from my dad to a larger ranch to the Pitchforks. Like, as I say, keeping records and doing things differently than what you would do on a smaller ranch. At the Pitchforks, it was much different. Well, I say much different in a way it wasn't. A cow's a cow, and you worked them basically the same way, whether you're pinning 100 head or pinning 500. It's basically the same way. But as I say, I was fortunate, very fortunate to do that. If I hadn't been at Pitchforks, I'd probably ended up just on a camp somewhere. As some of my friends, it's great people that's on the camp, but I kind of wonder, and I've seen it, what they do after you live on a camp all your life, and I think some things are furnished, and you get paid a decent salary today's times, but some of the guys, I really wonder what they have in their future. Well, I've seen it. They don't save enough money, even if it's 401. They think we can't put much money in that because we need it to live on. But anyway, it's kind of a problem. But anyway, I'd probably just been on camp if I hadn't. Or I might have gotten out of the ranching, Cowboy. And I loved Cowboy. I really do. I went those guys, and Cowboy is something you can't explain. It's something that it's just a big. You can look at it as a game. It's a game between a man on a horse and a cow. The cow don't want to go in the pen, and the man on the horse trying to get that cow in the pen. It's a game. Sometimes the cows win. It's Pitchforks. They did a bunch. they won.
Bob Moorhouse worked at the famed Pitchfork Ranch for 35 years and served as ranch manager for 20 years. The Pitchfork is an iconic Texas ranch, and I asked Bob to talk about the history of the ranch.
I'm glad you asked that, because it's incorporated in 1883, and I think I was the sixth manager there. 160,000 acres, and then we had some ranch in Wyoming, and later we bought a ranch in Kansas, and the Pitchfork, it's known for, I think, the hospitality. We had a lot of tours, and well, I don't mean a lot of tours, but we didn't turn anybody down that wanted to come visit. I hope that we treated our employees good. And I would like to have been able to pay them more. Every time I went to St. Louis, I tried to get and usually did get a raise for the guys. And it's just I can't say unique ranch, because unique means one. Just a great ranch. You just good and didn't have oil. I remember the first oil well. I remember going down to that evening when they said they struck oil, going down to it. And unlike the 460s that had a lot of oil and a lot of the bigger ranches, but the Pitchforks had to make it on the cows as a ranch. And we had good horses, and that's before we had the horse sales, and the income didn't come from horses or oil or hunting. Most ranches depend a lot on hunting, unless they have enough oil to and don't need to do the hunting. But if you're just trying to ranch and make a living on a ranch, cows and hunting, if you don't have oil, hunting's kind of important. And we, like Moorhouse Ranch, we have some good guys, and they used to be. People thought, well, they're just going to throw out beer cans and leave the gates open, but they don't do that. If you get a good bunch in, you basically become friends with them. In later years, I remember the first time I approached the board with a fellow that wanted to come and take over the Pitchfork, and as well as the wildlife and the hunting, and Pitchfork didn't want to do it. They wanted to themselves, or part of them did. And I'm probably talking out of school now, but it's the truth. Anyway, a couple of years later, they saw what money was falling through the cracks or leaving on the table, so they started doing the hunting and got real interested in it, and still do today. And it's even a big, fancy, nice, well-known ranch like the Pitchforks depend a lot on the wildlife. And it hurts. Like right now, the quail population's way down, and you start looking at the hunting. I remember in later years going to St. Louis to the board meetings, and my report on the cattle and the ranch as manager was shorter than the oil report and the hunting report, which suited me just fine, because I was in the hot seat when I went to St. Louis. I'll tell you what, that's one part of the manager ranch I didn't like. And they treated us good. We stayed in the nice hotels, and we would eat nice, and they treated us very well when we went up there. And the Williams family, they were a great family. And it's the older guys have passed on. And I think of them a lot. And it's changed so much. The Pitchforks, look at the 460s, the Huplaw there over the Taylor Sheridan. I'm really talking out of school now, but and a lot of the ranches have sold, the big ranches that have sold, and it's kind of sad. And I was very fortunate to be manager of the Pitchforks when I was, because Mr. Williams was alive, and I answered to him, and he was a very good, fair gentleman, and I kind of had it made compared to working I was under a board, but Mr. Williams was president, and I pretty well went to him with decisions and questions on what to do, and he was very understandable when I explained something to him. It's not like that today, and again, I'm probably talking out of school, but it's not like that today. I'll repeat that I was very lucky. I was at the right time. We still had the wagon. We pulled out a wagon. Well, I brought it back out and reinstalled it or whatever, brought it back into existence. And the Cowboys, I think they liked it. Their wives probably didn't like them staying But we'd pull the wagon out and take basically to the Croton Breaks, which is a good ways down, and we'd take the remuda with it, and the cowboys would stay down there from, like, they'd come down Sunday evening and stay till Friday or Saturday, and then go home and take a bath or shower or whatever. And it worked out well. And some people say, well, you just did it because you wanted a Western Horseman to come in and take a picture. And I said, no, that's not really right. And then some people, I guess, even probably, I hadn't heard it, probably just thought, well, Bob, as many photographs you take, you want a wagon to photograph. And then see that gentleman on the wall over there, David Ross. A lot of people said I hired him because he was so photogenic. Well, I took a lot of photographs of him, but that's not why I hired him.
During his time as manager of the Pitchfork Ranch, Bob Moorhouse was known for his commitment to the traditional way of doing things. He one time said this: "We want to tell our grandchildren that we pulled out a wagon in the 1990s, and not bragging about it, but we're glad we did it. And I'm glad that we work for people who like tradition and heritage, as well as the bottom line."
I'm very traditional. Probably too much so. And I look back and I wouldn't take a picture if somebody had a cap on, unless it's extremely windy or something. And I just didn't do it. I wanted my pictures look like it was 100 years ago. And most of them did. Of course, a butane bottle sitting there beside. Well, we didn't use butane. We usually dug a fire pit when we branded. I don't think it was just because I liked tradition. Even the board approved of it. They liked it. And the board was traditional. They liked the pitchfork, the old pitchforks. And they came down, when the board was, the owners, which there was some of the board, we had some of the board that weren't owners, but the owners came down and rode a lot with us. And they had a lot of memories themselves before I was there. So they liked the wagon. And I like the wagon. And I think if you're a cowboy, you need to be a cowboy. If you're a baseball player, you dress like a baseball player. And I'm a little fanatical about that. And still am. I still am. But the wagon worked. It worked. It worked for us. And in some places it wouldn't work. And a lot of places still use wagon. Very, very few actually pull a wagon with a team, which we did. And a lot of people, my brother's got a wagon, but it's they pull it with a pickup, which is, if you have different ranches around maybe 100 miles from one ranch, you have a wagon that it's all works the same, except you pull it with the pickup to get to your location or to your ranch. And that wagon's probably, like the Red Steagall Ranch Gathering. I love to see those wagons come in there. They're pulled in with the team, and it's very traditional, and I like it. But I'll have to admit, it's in the past. It really is. If you do use a wagon, which there's some of old big old ranches out west still do. As I say, the time I was at the Pitchforks, that was a good time, and they don't use a wagon now. But I guess I do know that the board would like for them to use it some, or like for them to maybe pull it out occasionally for maybe a party or something. But that's kind of that's not the real thing. Ours was really, really the real thing. We did it pretty well. We kept it as traditional as we could. And just some of it just for the fun of it, and some of it because it worked. It worked. The drive from the, say, Batch Camp or somewhere down there back and forth with several horses and several horse trailers, and several men, it worked for us. It sure did.
Did that attract certain kind of cowboy that wanted to come work at the Pitchfork because of the way you did things, or was there a certain kind of a man you were looking for when you were hiring guys?
Pitchforks, Wagners, 460s, all of those ranches, the young cowboys wanted to work to those ranches. And the young cowboys wouldn't stay at one ranch. They wanted to go, if they're working Pitchforks, they wanted to go to the Wagners and see how they flank calves, or how they drug calves, or how they work pasture. And they went, and I told a lot of those guys, I said, I don't blame you when you're young, jump around, but when you get older, you need to stick to one place, because you'll get old someday, and you won't have a pot to pee in. And we've got, I can name some at Pitchforks, and they've taken roots there, and have been there a long time. But these guys that just change, they get married and have a family and change a lot. And I know a lot of them that do, and that's fine. I can't criticize them, but yeah, they wanted to come to the ranch. If you had a wagon, they heard about you, and they'd want to come and go out with the wagon. And I sure don't blame them. They can tell people now that, I worked for the Pitchforks when we still pulled out a wagon, and I'm proud of that. And I think they are too. But I'm proud myself of having a wagon. And some people probably thought, it's outdated, especially when the helicopter's sitting over there beside it. It kind of. But anyway, we used the helicopter a good bit, but we sure didn't. Later on, we didn't use it as much. Those big pastures, old cattle were spoiled, and I could go into another story about myself. And I back way up in the early conversation that we've had about, I just thought I had supposed to be a cowboy, cowman, rancher, ranch manager. But I've thought a lot. There's things, if somebody just told me, Bob, you can do anything you want, I didn't think I had a choice. I thought I was just supposed to come home and be a rancher, cowboy. I might have been a pilot or something like that. I love airplanes, love to fly, and helicopters. But that's another story. And a lot of people can't believe that I would want to do anything but being a cowboy and a manager. But and I don't know if I would change or not. But let's just throw that in. The cowboys liked the wagon. They did. And I can tell you that some of them didn't. And I know some of them wise that didn't, But we made it work.
Was it challenging to find a good cook in those days to go out on the
Yes and no. We had some cooks that cooked at the cookhouse, and then we pulled the wagon out, and they didn't. I remember one cook. He was a good guy. I loved him. And he liked to ride, I guess, and he asked us, we was pulling the wagon out, said, well, you think I can take a horse and maybe when I'm not cooking go out with you cowboys? And after 2 or 3 days, we didn't let him, but after 2 or 3 days, he saw that cooking's a pretty big job, a damn big job, and you need a good hoodlum, a good helper. I don't really remember any problem with cooking. With one cook, M.O. Adams, lived at the farm and helped us farm, drive tractors, and we had a lot of cultivated land at that time. And Elmo was a good cook. He ran a cafe and owned a cafe in Guthrie. He just kept bugging me for a job, and I hired him, not for a cook, but for a farm. Anyway, he cooked for the wagon and liked it. He cooked mostly for us. It worked out well. And another farmhand, a Mexican boy, Gerardo, lived at the farm by Elmo, and he was the hoodlum, and he was good. He liked it, and he and Elmo were good friends, and they got along good. So it worked out well. But I have known some people that have had trouble getting to cook, and there's some good cooks around the friends that I know that travel from different ranches. Charlie Ferguson's one that comes to mind. A lot of them, it's kind of like a day worker. They just go from one ranch to the other. And that kind of brings up another subject. We used a lot of day work, and I call them day workers, but actually they were week workers, I guess. You've never heard of that, and I've never heard of it, but it's a term I just kind of coined. But they would come in, well, they'd either bring their horses or use ours, and you would kind of negotiate on that. But they'd come in on a Sunday afternoon and work all week, and then they were off for the weekend and either go home or whatever, and then come back the next week. So they were kind of guaranteed through the season of working through the week instead of just working for a day and load your horse and go home and maybe have a blowout. And if you had a blowout, that took your wages for that day to fix that blowout. And of course, we fed them and everything. So it worked out good for them and good for the ranch, because I knew they'd be there. If they stayed there, kind of like the wagon, if you take the wagon down the breaks and they're down there, you know they're going to be there the next morning. Unlike sometime you'd hire a day worker maybe and he didn't show up. It worked out well both ways. It was a win-win situation, I think.
In his book entitled Come and Get It, The Story of the Old Cowboy Cook, Ramon Adams wrote this about cowboy etiquette. The cowboy might not have acquired the polish of a refined deportment, but he made his own rules and observed them. His code fitted the life he lived and had as high of a standard as that of cultured society. It originated from the principles of men who followed a life in the open range, a life free from sham and hypocrisy.
Yeah, when I said that earlier, it's hard to understand. It's hard to explain why I said that. Yeah, we were very strict about our rules. Around the wagon, we had things you could do and things you couldn't do, and literally, if you did something that you weren't supposed to, you'd get a shapping. And it was kind of fun, and in a way, it was don't do that, And then obviously, the things that you shouldn't do around where a cook is, where you're eating, and the shapping was kind of a fun discipline. Yeah, we stuck by the real rules of I'd call it cowboy etiquette. Cowboys like that. Some rules, you could break if you thought you needed to. Cattle were getting away, and you might not supposed to cross over somebody, but if you cross over him and he's not holding up his end of the deal, you cross over him to keep the cattle from getting away. Well, that's a no-no. But in my books, if you kept the cattle from breaking out or getting away, I'd break that rule to do it. Cowboying is like everything, and I just stress common sense so much. The world doesn't have any common sense now. They really don't. Common sense is more important than books. And I'm seeing that more and more all the time. I'm seeing very successful people, and not necessarily in the ranching industry, or some of them in the ranching industry that didn't go to college, that are very successful. And mainly because they had common sense. But I know a bunch of them that went to school and got a PhD in whatever they got. They didn't have any common sense. And I saw it at the Pitchforks. I shouldn't say this, but maybe somebody on the board came down, or somebody, say a bookkeeper, a CPA or something, came down to the Pitchforks to spend a couple of days to see what it's like, and you put him on a horse and say, now go, you stay on this road and you go right straight up here. We're making him drive this direction, and kind of keep, maybe I didn't have any, they just didn't have any common sense. I'm not going to call any names, but just like it, say the cookhouse. And the Ranching Heritage, has our cookhouse there. And there's a place that I sat and nobody else sat there. And everybody knew it. And there's a chair on the other end, a stove there. And James Golson had a chair on one side of the stove, and I had a chair on the other side of the stove. We'd have a new guy come in and sit in my chair, and James, he didn't know what to say. And James said, he said, Joe, you see that picture on the wall over there? Go over there and look at it real close. And I'd go sit, or something like that. I'd go sit in my chair. And the places you sit at the table, I mean, you sit there every time. Nobody sat in your place. And Bobby Ellen died. He sat on my left. And when he died, nobody sat there. I don't know. And unless we had company, then I would basically allow them to sit there. But everyone knew that they didn't sit where Bobby sat. And you did not. There was here's the table, and you had benches. And you sat around. You didn't sit on the bench until they rang the bell. And then you got up and sat at the table on the bench. But you dang sure better not sit at the table before they rang that bell. I don't know who made that rule up, but that was just a rule now. And we'd ring a bell 15 minutes before the meal, and then whenever they put it out on the table, the cook would walk out and ring the bell, and that's when you ate. But I guess the 15-minute bell was basically for the cowboys saying the bunkhouse to let them know it's 15 minutes till we're fixing to eat. Little things like that, little things. And I'll think of a whole lot more after you leave, but that's just a couple I thought of at the cookhouse. And, of course, you can go into catching horses. There's a whole lot of etiquette in catching your horse. Say James Golson, the wagon boss, he was catching horses, and we'd have all the remuda held up, and everybody would just say the name of the horse they want. And everybody would do it, not yelling or anything, but they kept calling the horse's name because he might see that horse and the horse that you want, and he might see him, and in a minute he didn't. Anyway, he had 2, 3, 4 horses in his mind, and so he could, one stick his head out, he'd know which one to catch. And he'd lead that horse out to you, turn the horse around back toward the remuda, and you'd take that rope off promptly. So he could go back in there and catch another horse. Then you would bridle your horse. But you dang sure didn't go saddle him till the last horse was caught. And then everybody went and saddled their horse. But you didn't. You waited till the last guy, which would be James, he'd catch his horse last. When he let his out, that's when everybody went and saddled their horse. Things like that. I could think of a lot of them later, but somebody kind of has to prompt me on, as like you're doing, asking questions.
In the foreword to Bob Moorhouse's book of photography, Pitchfork Country, his friend and fellow photographer Wyman Menzer wrote these words about Bob. As a working cowboy who carries his cameras and lenses sometimes 20 to 30 miles a day on horseback, Bob has been able to record moments in the field few photographers will ever see. With an inherent appreciation for great light and its selected application to the subject, Bob's photographic images are nothing less than an accurate portrayal of the life.
Two things. Well, we had a lot of wild turkey, and I'd see those turkey, and I think, man, that's beautiful, that light hitting them. And I thought, I want to take a picture of them to show my dad. So I started taking some pictures of turkey, and then coyote, and then bobcats, and I thought, man, you need to take pictures of these cowboys. You're in the perfect situation. And as I said earlier in our conversation, I went with the cowboys a lot, and when I went, James Golson was, or whoever wagon boss we had, I was just one of the cowboys basically, until if we just worked in the pasture, and whenever was maybe delivering yearlings or something, I kind of said we're going to do it this way. And I carried camera behind my saddle, and I had a good camera, a good lens, and I'm the only person I know that knows how I can a good camera with a long lens behind your saddle. And actually, Cowboy, now I'm bragging, Cowboy and photograph too. And basically my Cowboy came first. I didn't, and I had a way of getting that camera out pretty quick. And I might lope ahead of the Cowboys and take a picture of them coming or something. But when it got the real Cowboy, and the camera was in the case. But anyway, and I think, I'm gonna brag again. I think I could, with my eyes, I think I can see some colors. Maybe if somebody's wearing a blue shirt and somebody drives up in blue car, all of a sudden I see blue. I can see that. And I guess that may be why I take so many colored photographs. And compose, I knew how to, I don't know why, nothing taught to me, but if some subject was there, I knew how to frame it. I knew how to basically what I wanted in that picture. And I knew what to take and what not to take. And then the light is the most important thing in photography. The most important thing. I could get into describing photography about the light and what a give and take in light, but I won't do that because no one would know what I was talking about. But anyway, I like to take pictures, and then and basically didn't do anything with them. And then somebody, a guy named Scruggs was. He was on the board at Texas Tech, and he came by to see Jim one time, and Jim told him about my photographs, and he said, yeah, I'd like to see some, and there's a couple of wild turkeys, and he put it on the cover of Progressive Farmer, which was a big magazine at that time. That was the first thing I ever did. And I think, well, that $500, I'd buy a whole lot of film. And then I started thinking about taking a picture, like, I'm going to take a picture of this, but I'm going to leave enough room at the top of it so you can put Progressive Farmer or Western Horseman. I started thinking, take it vertical instead of horizontal, kind of like that. But anyway, I really enjoyed it, and I took a lot of it because I wanted to capture my time at the Pitchforks, who was there, who I worked with, and sadly, as I just told you, the barn burned up and burnt nearly all of my slides up. Man, that hurt. Man, it hurt. Anyway, but I still have some. I enjoyed photographing. I really did. And basically, it was a hobby. And people say, you're the photographer. I said, well, yeah, I'm who you're thinking about, but I'm really not a photographer. I like to, and I have some good equipment. If I sold a cover, I'd probably put that money into lens and cameras. I just liked it, and I basically, I guess I was kind of successful at it. One thing, and everybody asks me now, look, don't you photograph anymore? And I said, no, not really. They said, no, and why? I said, well, I left all my subject matter at the Pitchforks. And that's the truth. The Weatherford's cutting horse capital of the world. And, I like cowboys. I like those cowboys at Pitchforks, real cowboys. I'm not saying cutters aren't real cowboys, but there's two different things. And there's a lot of horses around here, and horse people and cowboys, but I don't know. Might be a little bit laziness. Another thing, everything's changed from my old film camera to the digital stuff, and they do so much with the digital camera. I call it cheating almost. When I took a photograph, there wasn't anything in that photograph that I needed to take out. What I shot is what I saw, but now they shoot it, and if there's a telephone pole in the back, they can take it out. They can make it lighter or darker or whatever. It's just kind of like learning to photograph all over again in a way. It's more technical than it was when I had shooting old F1 cameras, and I've got a pile of them up there. I buy them used, and they were tough, and there wasn't a whole lot of buttons on them. And now you buy a camera. I got one up there, and more buttons than what I know. You know, what's this button for? I kind of like to shoot from the hip. But anyway, I really enjoyed the photographing. I really did.
In the previously mentioned book of Bob's photos, Pitchfork Country, Bob is quoted as saying this: "I'm probably too fanatical about it, but I like my photographs to look old, to look like scenes from 100 years ago. We're as good today as the Cowboys were a century ago. I just like the tradition." One of Bob Moorhouse's most frequent subjects in his photos is Pitchfork Ranch cowboy David Ross.
He was the most dedicated cowboy in forest, keeping Western style, or whatever you might call it. I don't care if it's breakfast or whatever. He had his cuffs on, and probably his chinks on, of course, boots and everything, and just looked like a cowboy. And he's one of them that he enjoyed me photographing him, and I appreciate that. Some people, you see, and I'd have long ends. Somebody would be at the wagon, somebody'd be sitting over there on a post pile, and a pile of stumps, wood, where we kept our wood, and I might aim a camera at them, and they might kind of look off or something, which I didn't appreciate. But old David Ross, he saw me with the camera. He'd go perch up somewhere, and he says, "This will make a great shot. I bet Bob sees me." I just said that. Never have said it, but he was good subject matter. And well, look at that photograph, or that painting over that. That's a painting from a gal, Shannon Lawler, and man, she is talented. She is so talented. I think she's painted 20 some odd photographs of mine, and she wanted to have a big showing of exhibit of all of them together. And the NCHA was going to do something, but we're still trying to find a place for her to show those paintings, and she is so good. But and there was a story in Western Horseman a couple of months ago. Well, I think it's the August issue about her. But David, he was, and other. There's some more photogenic than others, but after saying that and being fair, I photographed all of them.
Did you have a sense when you were doing that you were capturing something that wasn't going to be seen again, or that wasn't going to last forever?
Definitely. I guess that's one reason, like, say, David, you can't look at that photograph or that painting over there. That could be 100 years ago. And I kind of like from look like it's 100 years ago. And if there's something in the picture, well, of course, that's almost too strong to say I don't take one if something's in it. You might take a good branding picture and something's in it that in a day's time, well, say a vaccine gun or something. But yeah, I like from the look. I didn't take anything that wasn't real, and I was kind of proud of that fact. God, after saying all this, I really missed out tons of those slides that I have had, but and I still have some.
Bob Moorhouse is respected for his horsemanship in the ranch horse world, and he one time said this about the partnership between the working cowboy and the horse. "Some people ride a horse just for recreation or entertainment, but we get to ride a good horse and do our job at the same time. That's a really big plus."
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because I haven't. That one part, it's a big part of my life, and I wouldn't even have thought about bringing it up. But yes, that's not sitting there just because you're here, but that's Western Horseman, I got that big bronze and I'm kind of proud of it. Western Horseman gave it to me, Horseman of the Year, which they give one each year, and I was very proud of that. My brother and I and a couple of other guys, 3, 4 of us, started this Ranch Horse Association. And it's still in existence. It's changed a lot. You take your good ranch horse to town and show him off. Show him up changing leads and stops and roll backs. Then you rope something and drag him and take something down the fence and turn him. And people didn't know, the cowboys didn't know about good horses. They didn't. They had a horse they thought was good, but nobody saw him except the other cowboys. But then they had a horse that would stop pretty good, and then they'd go compete. And then they'd say, well, heck, I thought my horse stopped pretty good, but he doesn't stop. I've got to go home and work on my stop. I didn't know a ranch horse was supposed to stop like that or spin or whatever. And people got to, and then, of course, Ray Hunt was at the early stage of that we learned a lot from him. And no, before that, and I'll use my dad as an example. A horse was just a tool to my dad. And he rode horses all his life, broke horses, started horses. But it's literally a tool. But a horse, to me, I really enjoyed making a horse and learning what it took to make him do what he did, what buttons to push, when to give him credit, when not, whatever. I mean, there's a jillion things you could say that I've learned over the years. And I'm sad to say that I've got a health problem that I don't know if I'll ride anymore or not. But just about time I've got it all figured out. Now I'm too old to do it. That sounds funny, but it's kind of true. And and because of that, I got to judge a bunch of horse shows and different things, and like Road to the Horse. I just love a good horse. But and when I say all of that, I still like a good ranch horse. Some of these horses are too perfect, I guess I'd say. You take a reiner and you do the reining. That's probably about all that horse can do, especially a cutter or a horse you lead in there, conformation. Except take not Road to the Horse, World's Greatest Horseman. You got to do all of, and one thing, the person's got to be able to do different things, and the horse has got to be able to do all things. He doesn't do just one thing. I think I know we've got too much just making horses that can only do one thing. They need to be an all-around, like a horse on the ranch. But anyway, yeah, I love the horse. I really do.
In an interview with American Cowboy magazine in 1998, Bob said this about the inauthentic portrayal of the cowboy. You go to a dance hall in Amarillo, and there'll be about 50 guys wearing big black hats and roper boots, and you couldn't get a crew to work cattle out of the lot of them. The way they act may hurt the real cowboy's image. They don't even know how to crease their hat, and the closest they ever get to a cow is a T-bone steak. I asked Bob why it was important for him to preserve the authentic image of the cowboy.
Well, I don't know why it's so important, but it is. I'm a little bit like Red Steagall. You gotta ride for the brand. You gotta, I think if you're a cowboy, you need to be a good person. You need to pass that image on, and wear a good hat and wear a good pair of boots and kind of like tradition, like Red Steagall is. And I'm no Red Steagall, and don't mean to be, but he likes to pass that image, keep that image, like somewhere west of Wall Street or something, that he interviews people, and it's important. It's important that we need to hold on to it. we don't want the ranches to be a dinosaur. We really want, and that's, I really don't like to see these good, big traditional ranches, big or little traditional ranches sell. You know, my mother and dad's made them, and they gave a lot up to make a ranch. I'm just thinking out loud, and then and they pass it on their sons and daughters, and they kind of hold on to it. But they don't have the feeling that the mother and dad had when they put it together. And then you take the next generation after that, and they, I hate to sell this. Well, Grandpa sure wouldn't like it if I sold this, but yeah, well, not really interested in the ranch. We live in Dallas. We don't like to. Let's just sell the ranch and split it up. You know, that's where it goes. And the families that gave up so much to, whether it's passed on to them or from their dad, from their great granddad, and it's sad. But I tell myself, you got to learn to go with the change. World's change. You got to accept changes. I don't like them, but you got to accept them. But it's very important to me. Very important. I think a good example of that, in a way, is North Fort Worth. There's so many people that come in there, foreigners, and I was there yesterday. And I like to go down there. There's a lot of heritage to it, but it's not the real cowboys there. But it's showing how interested people are in the cowboy, whether they're Chinese or Asian or whatever. Or I visited with a couple yesterday from Florida. I had a good visit with them, and they just interested in the cowboy way of life. I had a girl walk up to me the other day. He said, "Man, you look like a cowboy. Are you a cowboy?" And it's a compliment. And I said, "Well, I was." And I was proud of that. But people like that. They like that image and that's why the westerns are so. And that's why Taylor Sheridan is making these movies. People like the cowboys, and the movies. A lot of movies don't depict the real cowboy, and that's sad. And you probably can't make a movie that would sell if you just depicted just the cowboy. It wouldn't be a movie. It'd be some kind of something just to show the cowboy. But cowboy, keeping the image is important to me. It is very important. I've had some health problems. I've been wearing some shoes, some kind of loafer deals around. But my daughters or my wife said the other day, said, "Bob, you aren't dressing like Bob Moorhouse." I said, "Yeah, you're right." So I thought, well, I might have a health problem, but I need to dress like Bob Moorhouse. But anyway, I sound like I'm bragging, but it's just kind of one of my thoughts, and that's the way I feel.
In 2008, Bob Moorhouse was the recipient of the Golden Spur Award from the National Ranching Heritage Center in Lubbock, Texas. The Golden Spur Award is considered the most prestigious honor in the ranching industry, and I asked Bob to reflect on the importance of receiving that award.
The Ranching Heritage Association, Mr. Burns, D. Burns, was manager of the ranch, of the Pitchfork Ranch before Jim Humphreys and me. And Mr. Burns was one of the ones that helped start the ranching heritage. And then Jim was very instrumental in the ranching heritage and helped it. And I think he was president at one time. And then I was president of it one time. And then on the board, and my wife was on the board, Linda, on the board. And I think it's great. It's kind of like what I was saying about North Fort Worth a while ago. It's kind of something similar because the people do like the ranching, the history of the ranches. The history of the ranches are real interesting. And that's why I like Red Steagall's stories so much. And then I was at a cutting. We had a ranch horse cutting association. I was in Alpine, Texas, in the arena, and somebody came up and said, "You won the Golden Spur Award." I said, "Oh my God." I said, one thing, I don't deserve it. Another thing, I can't get up in front of that many people and talk. And I was serious. It's almost like I don't want it because I can't get up and talk. But anyway, I got through it. And it's kind of like another deal award I've got. And I got through them. But anyway, I was very, very honored. And as the people you named that you've interviewed and you're going to interview, I feel if I'm amongst them, I'm humbled, very humbled to have that award sitting right up there. I think I was there 35 years. I think I was manager 20 years. And I'm not good with dates. I think that's about right. Pitchforks, I'll say this again. It's great. It was a great place to work. Great. I mean, I had it made. I really did. Mr. Williams treated me so good. And it's a ranch doesn't. Most ranches, well, say the Pitchfork, and I'm sure not complaining, but you know, you don't get rich. Even if you're the manager, you don't get rich. You get a retirement, but it's a good life, and it's a good place to raise. The old cliche, it's a good place to raise your family, and that's the truth. My daughters can work; they really can. They did a photo shoot yesterday in North Fort Worth for that Paint Horse magazine. Both of them worked together on that, and they're good girls. They know how to work. Common sense too. I'm proud of them. Lath Withers, old timer at 460s, and he's one that brings back old memories. George Humphreys, Lath Withers, Royce McLaury, those guys. Everybody wanted to interview him because he's just an old, been there all of his life. They were interviewing him, and about 2 minutes in the interview, he said, "Well, don't you think that's about enough?" That's kind of what I feel. Somebody interviews me, don't you think that's about enough? I know some old cowboys that they've got lots to say, but they don't say much. But you give them about 2 shots of whiskey now, you can interview them. They will talk.
All right, folks, that's it for today's episode. I'd like to thank Bob Moorhouse for taking the time to visit with me. I'd like to thank the National Ranching Heritage Center in Lubbock, Texas for sponsoring this episode. You can find out more about the National Ranching Heritage Center at ranchingheritage.org. I'd like to thank Hal Cannon for playing the Cowboy Crossroads theme music. You can find out more about Hal at halcannon.com. I'd like to thank my Trail Boss patrons Bob Kelly, Chris Ryden, and Scott Anderson. If you're enjoying Cowboy Crossroads and would like to help me keep it going, you can become a patron at patreon.com/Cowboy Crossroads. That's patreon.com/Cowboy Crossroads. You can also make a donation on my website at andyhedges.com. If you'd like to contact me with a question or a comment or a story, I'd love to hear from you. Send an email to andy@andyhedges.com. Thank you for listening to Cowboy Crossroads.